The first time I twisted the shutoff valve in broad daylight. I did it with a kind of slow-motion calm, like I was starring in my own little drama, and the birds were just extras, chirping in the warm Saturday sun as I crouched behind my hedge out of sight. Gave the handle a slow, deliberate turn. Felt that deep shudder run up the pipe, like a final breath from some wounded animal, and then everything went quiet. Down the block, a sprinkler gave a death rattle and left behind this weird little wet halo on the grass. I brushed off my hands, went back inside, and sat on my porch with coffee, just another neighbor enjoying the weekend. You know what I mean? Nobody noticed right away. The joggers barely missed a step without the usual hiss of sprinklers to keep them company. But by noon, you could feel the ripples start. Barbara's husband, big voice and bigger ego, was on the sidewalk hollering into his phone about the water pressure. Down the street, a family started dragging laundry baskets back inside, annoyed that their washing machine was dry. And then, just before sunset, there was Barbara at my door, knocking like she was on official business, all fake concern and darting eyes, asking if I'd noticed the water pressure. I leaned in the doorway, mug in hand, picture of suburban innocence, and told her, "Nope, shower worked fine this morning. Must be something local." That set her back a step, but she regained her balance with a stiff nod and promised to contact the city. I wished her luck and shut the door, laughing to myself as she walked away with her spine straight as a fence post. By Sunday, lawns were going crispy at the edges, kids were wandering around with empty water guns, and the HOA was convening an emergency meeting in Barbara's driveway. I watched from my porch as the neighbors fanned themselves, waving bills and mumbling about ruined laundry, dying flower beds, and dry showers. Barbara, standing at the head of her folding chair courtroom, pitched her voice for maximum outrage. She needed someone to blame, and when nobody stepped forward, her gaze landed on me. "Strange how one property hasn't reported any problems," she called out, and half the block turned to look at my porch. I raised my glass in a lazy salute. "Plenty of water here. Maybe you folks need newer pipes." See, the trick was all in the paperwork. The control valve was on my land, buried in the legal tangle of easements nobody had read in decades. They could dig up every map, call every city inspector, but they'd never pin it on me. By Monday, the HOA group chat was full-blown chaos. Neighbors accusing each other, the water company, and of course, Barbara. Friendships crumbled over the state of lawns. It was honestly beautiful to watch. But then Barbara showed up at my door again, this time with 2 board members at her side, notepads in hand. "We need to check your property," she announced, like I was running a moonshine still out back. I sipped my coffee. "Not without a warrant or the city inspector, you don't. My property, my rules." One of the guys started sweating and backpedaling, insisting they just wanted to rule things out, but I stood my ground. Barbara's eyes narrowed. She'd have loved to pin something on me, but all she could do was stomp away, muttering threats. You want to know what started all this? My hedge. Years I spent nursing that green wall, trimming it to the exact inch the rules allowed, just to block Barbara's sightline. She hated that hedge, saw it as defiance, and one morning I found it yellowing, leaves dropping like bad confetti. Someone had poisoned it. I didn't need a detective to tell me who. The HOA notices came within days. Remove the hedge, replace it with compliant shrubs. I laughed, I really did. That hedge was more than a plant. It was a line in the sand. So I set to work, quietly installing a series of hidden shutoff valves on my side of the fence. Decades ago, when they subdivided this cul-de-sac, the easement for the water line ran right through my property. They all just assumed I'd never use that leverage. I spent a few days working on my irrigation in plain sight, letting Barbara believe I was just another struggling homeowner. Truth was, I was setting up the one move they'd never see coming. The valve became my orchestra baton, and the neighborhood danced to whatever tune I played. Pressure low? Neighbors called Barbara. Water trickling? More emergency meetings, more emails, more finger-pointing. By the end of week 1, Barbara was patrolling the block at night, flashlight in hand, peering over fences, desperate for a culprit. I kept my hose dripping, waved when she passed. She looked at me like I was the devil. Midway through the second week, the twist arrived. 2 hooded teenagers spray-painted "Hoarder" across my fence in neon orange. I caught them in the act, didn't yell, just stepped outside, voice low, told them, "Wrong house, boys. But I'll let you keep your secret. Just remember karma's got a long memory. They ran. I left the graffiti up for a day, then painted it over in the afternoon sun, smiling the whole time. Meanwhile, Barbara's grip was slipping. Her rules about lawn color, her fines for brown grass, suddenly looked ridiculous when nobody had water to keep their yards green. The neighbors turned on her, grumbling at first, then openly challenging her authority. One evening, Carl, my fence-side neighbor, leaned in and whispered, "They're talking about voting her out." You couldn't have planned this better. I just grinned. Sometimes things line up, that's all. Barbara, for all her bluster, couldn't help herself. She started digging behind my fence, husband in tow, convinced she'd find proof I was up to something. I watched them from my garage window, sipping coffee while they sweat and cursed, clueless that the valves were buried deeper than they'd ever dig. They gave up after an hour, muddy and beaten. The neighborhood fractured into factions, diehard Barbara loyalists, the newly rebellious, and a big chunk of folks who just wanted to shower again. Barbara's desperation reached a fever pitch. Threats, accusations, even a midnight bullhorn parade where she stood in the cul-de-sac, screaming about sabotage and traitors. The crowd, once loyal, now just looked embarrassed. The tipping point came at the next HOA meeting, the one that ended Barbara's reign. Someone had leaked financial records, misused funds, HOA money spent on her personal upgrades, the works. It wasn't me, but I could guess who had. The neighbors shouted, waved printouts, and when the vote came, Barbara was out. She tried to blame me, pointed right at my porch, called me the real enemy. I stood, let her rant, then said calmly, "You've accused me of everything, but never once produced proof. Maybe you should look in the mirror." That was the last straw. Barbara was done, but not finished. She handed out bottled water from her front lawn, pretending to be a savior, but when word spread, she charged it to the HOA one last time. Any leftover goodwill evaporated. Fights broke out. Someone spray-painted liar on her garage. The HOA board resigned in disgust, and for a while, the block was lawless, nobody in charge but suspicion. She tried one last stunt, a big barbecue, bounce house, the works, billed straight to the HOA. The neighbors lost it, called the cops, and this time they didn't just give a warning. Barbara was led away in handcuffs, her husband shouting protests, while the kids were pulled from the bounce house, and the catering truck sped off. After that, things got weirdly quiet. Neighbors avoided her house like it was haunted. Her husband held a yard sale, selling off relics of her rule. She tried to deliver a speech, voice shaking, but nobody listened. I should have felt satisfied, right? But the real victory wasn't Barbara's downfall. It was the shift in the block itself. The HOA was dead, replaced by informal cooperation. People started helping each other, arguing less, waving more. The street felt lighter. And me? I rebuilt. Not the hedge, never the hedge. Instead, I stacked a low stone wall where the green line used to be, solid, unbreakable, untouchable. Neighbors complimented it, offered to help, like we were all part of some new experiment. They never mentioned the hedge, never brought up the war. But the story lived on in glances, in the way people checked their water, in the hush that settled over the street at dusk. You want to know the funny part? I left the valve wide open, locked in place. No more games. The lesson had landed. Barbara was gone, the cul-de-sac had healed, and everyone got what they wanted, even if they never understood exactly how. Because in the end, control isn't about shouting the loudest or writing the most rules. Sometimes it's just knowing when to twist, when to wait, and when to let the silence do the talking. So, tell me, was I right, or was I just another villain with a better plan? Drop a comment, let me know where you stand. Right, wrong, justice, or just old-fashioned payback? Whose side are you really on?